What's going on? It's Ray with TruMission.com, and I'm so excited to be with you today. I truly believe God has huge things in store for your life and that your best days are ahead of you. You know, over the next couple of weeks, I want to talk to us about the subject of hope and what it means to have hope in our lives as we're fulfilling the mission and cause that God has placed within our hearts. Now, here's the thing. If you're living, you're going to face discouragement at times. You know, discouragement is one of those silent attackers. It's unique in that it doesn't always attack us the same way. Sometimes it's like a freight train coming straight at us, and at other times it just blindsides us, comes out of nowhere. And no matter how many times you seem to knock it down, here's the thing about discouragement. It'll want to get back up and take another swing at you. You see, if you're human, you're going to face discouragement in your life. Even the greats of the Bible, I think of like the prophet Elijah. Even the prophet Elijah in the Old Testament, who did great and mighty things for God, even he faced discouragement in his life. I think of a particular story that picks up in chapter 19 of 1 Kings. Now, here's the thing. Before you get to chapter 19, though, and you discover his discouragement, this is the prophet Elijah, you have to back up and see what he's gone through building up to this discouragement that he's facing in chapter 19. So if you read through the text, what you'll find in 1 Kings chapter 17 is Elijah's given a word from God. And in this word, he goes to the king and tells the king, hey, over the next several years, there's going to be a famine that's going to break out throughout the land. Now, Elijah then goes and hides. And while he is hiding, God sends him food and water through the vessel of a raven. Yeah, a bird. A raven is bringing a happy meal to Elijah during the time of this famine. Now, while he is there, God then speaks to him and tells him to go to this widow woman's house. So he shows up to this widow woman's house, and come to find out, she had been, her whole house had been stricken by this famine that was taking place. And she was preparing the last meal for her and her son because she was out of food. Then Elijah, he blessed her house, and the oil and flour that the woman had in her house to make her last meal, it never went dry all the way through until the famine was over. Now, in this same chapter, this widow woman's, her son dies. Elijah then prays for the kid, and he is raised from the dead. Now, I want you to think about what's happening in chapter 17. You see, in chapter 17, Elijah is living high, right? Because Elijah is seeing God's hand of miracles work mightily within his life. He's seen God deliver food from a raven. He's seen God miraculously provide for an entire household. He has seen God raise the dead. And it doesn't end there, because in chapter 18, Elijah is now facing the priest of Baal. The priests of Baal are calling on their gods, and Elijah challenges them to a duel. He says, why don't you do this? Why don't you call upon your gods? And we'll put a sacrifice. Each of us will put a sacrifice on an altar. You call upon your gods, and I'll call upon my God. And when you call upon your gods, and I call upon my God, whichever one answers with fire is the true and living God. Well, the prophets of Baal, they begin to call upon their gods, and nothing is happening. They begin to cut themselves to try to get the attention of their gods, but again, nothing is happening. Then Elijah takes his offering. He puts it on an altar, and he digs a trench around the altar. He covers the altar and the bull, everything on the altar. He covers all of it with water. He drenches the sacrifice. He drenches the trench that he dug around it. And he calls upon the God of heaven, and God answers by sending a consuming fire that consumes the sacrifice. And then Elijah takes out all 450 prophets of Baal. Now, in this same chapter, in chapter 18, a few verses later, Elijah is up on a mountain and he's praying. And while he's praying, God begins to deliver to him, hey, I'm going to now send rain. I'm going to break this famine, this drought in the land. And he sends his servant to go check and see, like, is there a cloud in the sky? His servant goes out and his servant looks up into the heavens and his servant comes back and says, Elijah, I looked up and there's nothing in the sky. This happened 7 times. And finally, the guy comes back to Elijah and says, I looked up into heaven, but all I could see was a cloud about the size of a man's fist. Now, I want you to think about that right now. A cloud the size of a man's fist in the sky is not much. And Elijah then says to him, go and get ready, get ahead of this, because I hear the sound of an abundance of rain. He sends word to the king to get out of there because the rain is about to come. And then one of my favorite parts of this whole story is the king is taken off in his chariot. And then Elijah, he rolls up his tunic and he takes off running, and he outpaces the chariot. Now, I would say all of these things that are happening in chapter 18 are absolutely amazing and causing, if it was me, to be on a high. I mean, what you have now seen is, as you've seen your God consume a sacrifice by sending fire from heaven. You've seen your God give you strength to seize 450 prophets of Baal. You've seen your God deliver a message where he's sending rain and it's going to break the drought in the land. Your God has strengthened you so you can outrun a chariot. Don't you know Elijah is facing some great moments with God? He's on a high with God. But I want you to see, and this is what I come to in 1 Kings chapter 19 now, and verse 4. You see, Elijah gets word that Jezebel is going to kill him. Jezebel hears that he has taken out her prophets of Baal, and she sends word that she's going to kill Elijah. So Elijah goes out by himself. He's alone in the wilderness, traveled all day, all night, got there. He's alone in the wilderness, and he sits down under a solitary broom tree, and he begins to pray that he might die. He says, Lord, I've had enough. Take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors who have already died. You know, what are some of the causes of discouragement? Because if Elijah can go through everything that he went through and still face discouragement, and I have to know in my life, I'm going to face discouragement sometimes. Well, let me give you some causes of discouragement today. The first one is this: the bottoming out after a victory can oftentimes bring discouragement. I mean, when you think about it, you come off of this high, and you've had this moment in which you've seen some great things take place. You have been fighting and fighting and fighting, and right after the big victory, you become vulnerable, just like Elijah was. You see, you cross that finish line and everything in you wants to drop your arms and drop your head and take a breather. And as soon as you cross the finish line, you have this feeling inside of discouragement. Have you ever been there? You ever walked through something hard and you're walking through this thing, you're fighting with everything you have, and you're not discouraged while you're fighting, but on the other side of the victory, you find yourself discouraged? Well, you're not alone. It's natural. After having fought a great fight of faith, it is natural to have this feeling inside where the enemy is trying to drag you into the place of discouragement. Why? Because you're vulnerable. Let me give you the second thing. The distraction of worry can oftentimes bring discouragement. You see, it's easier to focus on your problem than it is to celebrate and rejoice in the victory. Elijah lost sight of the incredible victory that God had given him in chapter 17, the incredible victories that God had given him in chapter 18, and instead he focused on those simple words of Jezebel in 1 Kings chapter 19 and verse 2, when she gives word, if by tomorrow may the God strike me dead if I haven't killed you just as you have killed them. You know, I think about this, that it's our negative talk. Not necessarily outside. And sometimes we speak it out of our own mouths, but oftentimes it's the negative talk that's going on inside our mind. That negative thinking that keeps bringing you back to, man, I'm not going to make it. Man, I need something to worry about. Come on, if you've ever been there in your life where you've gotten so accustomed to worrying and so accustomed to anxiety that it is almost like an addiction in your life, that when you have nothing to be anxious about or worry about, you make yourself anxious about something. You worry about something because you allow it to distract you. And if you're not careful, that distraction will discourage you. You know, the other thing I see is that loneliness brings discouragement. I think about Elijah. Now, he's out and he's praying to God. He's praying to God and he's saying, Lord, I've served you all the days of my life. And he goes on to say, but the people of Israel, they have broken their covenant with you. They have torn down the altars and they've killed every one of your prophets. And then he says, I am the only one left. And now they're trying to kill me too. Now, I want you to hear the words of what he's saying, the underlying tone. He's feeling alone. He's feeling isolated. He feels like he is facing something right now and there's no one he can lean upon. I found that feeling alone and feeling loneliness is as a place, it's a trap that the enemy wants to get you in so that he can isolate you and take you out of the mission that God has for your life. This is why I feel like it's so important to be involved in a community and so important to be involved in your local church, because it's there that you find those relationships that you're able to lean upon in times of distress, and you don't have to feel like you're journeying through this life alone. The fourth thing that I see is that exhaustion often brings discouragement. You know, Elijah, he's laying down in verse 5. He's laying down and he falls asleep underneath this tree. And while he is sleeping, an angel of the Lord appears and touches him. And here's what the angel of the Lord tells him. He says, get up and go eat. I know it sounds so simple, but sometimes we are moving so fast in life that we forget to take care of ourselves. Yeah, I'm talking to you right now. Maybe you have been spending so much of your time trying to help someone else, so much of your energy, so much of your strength helping others that you find yourself exhausted. And in the place of your exhaustion, the Lord would simply say to you, man, it's time to take care of you. You know, when your body runs down, you're prone to discouragement. You know, the fifth thing that I see is that fear oftentimes brings discouragement. In fact, I'll put it another way. Fear is the doorway to discouragement. This is what I see in verse 3 when Elijah says that he was afraid, so he fled for his life. You know, when you follow fear, it'll take you down a desolate, dry, and lonely place. And fear took Elijah into a desert. Don't let fear dictate your journey. Don't let fear captivate your heart and your mind, your energy, your effort to the point where you have discouragement inside of you that you look around and go, it'll never change. Because ultimately, it brings me to the sixth thing, and that is hopelessness that brings discouragement. Believing that the current situation is permanent. Why did Elijah want to die? He wanted to die because he thought his life was over. Listen to me, God's not finished with you. Your life isn't done. You may have felt a setback, but God is setting you up right now to move you forward. It's not the time to lay down and say, well, God, I guess I blew it too big this time. Listen, if you have breath in your lungs, God has purpose and mission for your life. Don't let discouragement rob you from the hope that's found in Christ Jesus. I think of what the writer of Hebrews says over in Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 1. He says, faith is the confidence that we hope for. It's the confidence that we hope for that will actually happen. It gives us the assurance about things that we cannot see. Man, let your faith give you that hope and that confidence to step out and be who God has called you to be, despite any of the attacks that the enemy may throw your way, despite the discouragement that's trying to come your way. Fix your eyes on Jesus, because there is more in store for your life. Your true mission begins in a relationship with Jesus. To find out more about this, check out the video entitled I'm with Jesus. If you're new to our channel, we upload videos every week, so be sure to subscribe and turn on that bell notification. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you soon.